we're turning the spotlight, or maybe the microphone is a better metaphor here, onto an instrument of success that is almost criminally overlooked.
Ooh, I like
They are
that.
talking about the human
Wow.
voice.
It's interesting you use the word instrument because that is physically and acoustically exactly what it is.
Right.
It's a wind instrument. But the problem is, for most of us, it's an instrument we never actually learn how to play.
We just sort of figured it out by
Yes,
accident.
we did. We just kind of picked it up as toddlers, figured out how to make noise, and then assumed we were stuck with whatever sound came out.
Exactly. And I think most people, myself included, have this default assumption that a good voice, that authoritative leader-like sound that commands a room,
That movie trailer voice.
that movie trailer voice, it's purely a genetic lottery ticket. You're either born sounding like that or you're not. You either have the golden pipes or, you're stuck with a squeak.
And that belief, it leads to some really unfortunate behaviors.
Or also,
Well, because we think we can't change the instrument, we try to fake the output. We see this all the time in corporate settings. People try to sound authoritative, so they do this weird fake thing where they artificially pitch their voice down.
oh, I know exactly what you mean.
They push their chin into their neck, and they try to sound all serious.
And it usually sounds like they have a bad head cold, or they're trying to do a bad impression of a radio DJ from the 1970s.
Precisely. And the tragedy is, it usually has the opposite effect of what they want.
Right. Instead of sounding authoritative, it just sounds...
And performative.
Blah.
And humans are very, very good at sniffing out a performance. We have a built-in detector for that.
So that brings us to the mission for this deep dive. We have a stack of sources today, articles, psychological studies, historical biographies, that completely flip that script.
They really do.
We are going to debunk the myth that you need to be born with a specific set of vocal cords to command respect. The argument here is that depth isn't about the size of your larynx. It's about the physics of pace and breath.
And we're going to look at the physiology of why stress makes us squeak. Why we lose our authority right when we need it most. And the psychology of why listeners trust a lower, slower cadence.
And to do that, we have assembled a truly fascinating cast of characters.
It's quite the lineup.
It is. It sounds like the setup to a very strange joke. We have Mark Zuckerberg facing a congressional nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
We have Sir David Attenborough before he was, well, Sir David.
Okay.
We have the cautionary tale of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos.
Yes.
And finally, we have King George VI declaring war on Germany.
It does sound random, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But they all share a common thread. Each of these stories illustrates the battle between vocal panic and vocal control.
So they show us the mechanism.
They show us the mechanism of how authority is actually produced, not faked, but produced.
There's a quote from one of our sources that I think frames this perfectly.
What's that?
It says, "The deepest voice in the room is the one that isn't trying."
That is the key. That's the whole thing right there. It's the paradox of power. It's not about effort. It's about the absence of tension.
So let's dive in. I want to start with the modern example because I think it's something everyone has seen clips of, and it's arguably the most relatable high-pressure scenario.
You're talking about Mark Zuckerberg.
I am.
Yes. Washington, D.C., April 2018.
Let's set the scene here because the context is brutal. I
Yeah.
mean, this isn't a friendly product launch at a tech conference where everyone is cheering for the new headset.
No, not at all. This is the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
It is the kind of week CEOs have nightmares about.
That's right.
There are cameras everywhere, protesters outside, and he is walking into a room full of lawmakers who are just ready to pounce.
The stakes were incredibly high. We're talking about regulatory pressure, massive trust erosion, and, actual tangible damage to the business if he messes this up.
And you have to remember, up until this point, Zuckerberg's default public persona was often described as, a bit awkward.
Robotic was the word people love to use.
That's the one.
Right. Overly technical, sometimes stiff, very efficient, but not necessarily warm. And the problem is, in a congressional hearing, stiff doesn't read as smart.
No.
It reads as suspicious and fast, which was his tendency when he'd talk about tech that reads as evasive.
So he's in the hot seat. But there's this one detail from the sources that I just love. It's about a photo that went viral during the hearings.
The binder photo.
The binder photo. An AP photographer with a long lens caught a shot of his binder that he left open on the desk during a break.
This was such a fascinating glimpse behind the curtain. I remember both Time and Wired broke this down.
Yeah, you'd expect a CEO's binder in that situation to be full of, dense legal stats, privacy statutes, maybe user retention data.
All the technical stuff.
And it had some of that. But what really stood out was that it was essentially a script for his behavior.
That's the pivot point. That's the key. He didn't just prepare answers.
No.
He prepared a delivery system.
And the sources talk about how he went through a ringer of witness prep, simulated hearings, aggressive questioning, coaching on humility. But the notes reveal he was being coached specifically on pacing.
Because there were effectively two versions of Zuckerberg in that room.
What do you mean?
Well, there's the biological man who is probably freaking out internally. His amygdala is firing, his heart rate is up, his body is just screaming, threat, threat.
Right, the human reaction.
And then there's the executive trying to sound like someone who deserves to be believed.
And sounding believable isn't just about the words you say. It's about how you say them.
Exactly. The sources point out that if you watch the testimony or even just read the prepared remarks, you see a CEO trying to project steadiness. But the delivery
was different. He was using controlled pauses, his breathing was steady, his pace was measured.
And that is the exact opposite of the default human reaction to scrutiny.
Right. I know for me, when I'm nervous or when someone confronts me, even if it's just my boss asking why a project is late, my instinct is to speed up.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to get the answer out, explain myself, and just get the pain over with.
Exactly. That is the fight or flight response manifesting in your speech. Your brain is saying, get this information out and retreat. So you talk faster, you might interrupt, you stumble over your words.
But Zuckerberg did the opposite.
He slowed down. And here is where it gets really interesting from a physiological perspective.
Okay, let's unpack the science. Why does slowing down make you sound deeper? And why does it make you sound more in control?
Okay, so we have to look at the link between stress and pitch. Our sources discuss research on what's called vocal stress analysis. When you are stressed, your body recruits tension.
A survival mechanism.
A total survival mechanism. You tighten your abs to protect your organs, you tighten your shoulders, you clench your jaw, and crucially, you tighten the muscles around the larynx, your voice box.
So you're physically squeezing the instrument.
Yes. And at the same time, because your abs are tight, your breathing becomes really shallow. You start breathing high in the chest, almost like you're hyperventilating just a little bit.
Which means you have less air to work with.
Precisely. So now you have this situation where the vocal cords are under high tension and the air pressure coming from the lungs is weak and inconsistent.
Okay.
Well, physics dictates that high tension plus low pressure equals a higher frequency. The pitch goes up. You get that tight, thin, squeaky sound.
So the squeak of nervousness isn't just an emotion. It's literally your body tightening up and strangling the sound.
It is purely mechanical. Now, the aha moment here, and what Zuckerberg's team likely drilled into him, is that a deeper voice is often just a pacing outcome.
What do you mean by that?
If you force yourself to slow down, you disrupt that stress cycle. To speak slowly, you have to take fuller breaths. You physically cannot sustain a slow, measured cadence on a shallow panic breath. It's impossible.
So by controlling the speed, you're actually forcing your body to fix its own breathing.
Exactly. Slower pace demands deeper air. Fuller breaths mean more support for the voice, and when the breath support is there, the throat muscles can finally relax. And when the throat relaxes, the resonance drops back down into the chest.
And that's where the rumble comes from.
That's the resonance. It's the sound vibrating in the chest cavity rather than being trapped up in the nose and throat. So Zuckerberg's lower, more authoritative sound wasn't because he suddenly grew new vocal cords overnight.
No.
It was because he slowed his pace down, which forced his physiology to calm down.
One of our sources puts it in a really cool way. Don't chase low pitch. Design low urgency.
That's a brilliant distinction. Trying to sound deep, that radio DJ voice we talked about, that's an identity performance. It's you acting.
Right.
But designing a slower delivery, that's a behavioral system. And system scale, performances crack under pressure. If you have a system for breathing and pacing, it holds up even when Congress is yelling at you.
So let's get practical. How do you, the listener, actually build this system? The sources give us some actionable tools based on this Zuckerberg example. One is called the hearing drill.
This is a great one for anyone who deals with aggressive stakeholders or just, tough questions.
Okay.
The drill is about practicing being interrupted. You have a friend or a colleague fire questions at you, and their specific instruction is to cut you off mid-sentence.
That sounds incredibly annoying.
It is. It's designed to be. But the goal isn't to answer the question perfectly. The goal is to maintain your cadence. When they interrupt, you stop, you breathe, and then you continue at the exact same speed.
So you don't speed up.
You do not speed up to try and beat their next interruption.
You're training yourself not to spike.
Exactly. You are desensitizing your nervous system to the trigger of being interrupted. You're teaching your body that an interruption is not a threat, it's just a pause in the conversation.
I like that.
Yeah.
Another one is the binder technique, inspired by the photo. It says you should pre-write not just your facts, but your opening sentence.
This is all about preventing what we call panic breath. You know that moment right before you start a presentation?
Oh, yeah.
The room goes quiet, everyone looks at you, and you go, sharp, gasping inhale sound.
Oh, yeah, the gasp. Okay, so today we're talking about...
Right. You've just locked tension into your chest before you've even said a word. The binder technique says, write down your opening sentence, word for word, memorize it.
So you don't have to think.
You don't have to think. If you know exactly what your first sentence is, you don't need to gasp for air and ideas at the same time. You can breathe out, wait a beat, and then just speak on a calm, natural inhale.
It bridges that terrifying gap between silence and speech.
It really does.
And finally, there's the two-beat pause.
This is simple, but incredibly powerful. Before you answer a hot question, one that makes you defensive or angry, force yourself to wait 2 beats, just silently. 1, 2, then speak.
That feels like an eternity when you're standing there.
It does. Inside your head, it feels like 5 minutes. You think everyone is judging you, thinking you don't know the answer.
But to the listener,
To the listener, it just looks like thoughtful control. It signals, I am not threatened by this question. I am considering it.
I love that. It's like you're reclaiming your time. You aren't operating on their clock. They are operating on yours.
Exactly. It shifts the power dynamic instantly.
Okay, so that's the defense strategy, how to survive the hostile hearing. But what about when you need to lead, when you need to inspire or, guide a team?
Right, the proactive side.
For that, we turn to a very different figure, a young man in London in the 1950s named David Attenborough.
Yes. And I love this story because it humanizes a legend.
I have a hard time imagining David Attenborough as a young man or as anything other than the voice of the planet.
I know.
In my head, he's always been 80 years old narrating a penguin migration.
Well, back in 1950, he was just a guy applying for a job. He applied for a radio job at the BBC and was flat out rejected.
Rejected. David Attenborough. It's like rejecting Michael Jordan from the basketball team.
Hard to believe, right. But the feedback was that his voice wasn't right for radio. And it gets even better.
Go on.
He eventually got a trainee job in television, which was this new, wild frontier at the time. But he was initially discouraged from appearing on camera. A producer named Mary Adams famously wrote in a memo that his teeth were too big.
His teeth were too big.
Ah,
That is hilarious.
can you imagine?
So he wasn't born as the voice of God. He was a guy with big teeth who couldn't get a radio gig.
Exactly. He didn't start as the world's narrator. He learned the craft. He spent decades refining timing and clarity. And the technique he mastered is what the sources call the difference between rush mode and guide mode.
Let's define rush mode.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I live there most of the work week.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
Rush mode is how most people talk in corporate meetings. You speak as if you're being timed. You're trying to jam the thought out before someone interrupts you or before the Zoom call ends.
You're pushing information at people.
You are. It's the please don't cut me off voice.
Yeah.
And physically, that leads to a high pitch and a thin voice because you're running on shallow air. You aren't pausing to breathe because you're afraid of losing the floor.
Okay, so that's rush mode. What's guide mode?
Now, contrast that with guide mode, which is the Attenborough style. Think about how he talks. He speaks as if he is describing a scene to someone who can't see it.
Here, we see the snow leopard.
Right. Notice the pace. It's steady. It has intentional emphasis. But most importantly, it is breath-led. He isn't squeezing the words out. The words are riding on the airflow.
The source makes a great point here. A deeper voice comes from speaking like you have time, even when you don't.
That's the psychological trick, isn't it?
Yeah.
The confidence isn't in the loudness. It is in the patience. When you narrate, you naturally slow down. When you slow down, your breath drops deep into the body. And when your breath drops, your voice drops.
It's that same physiological loop we saw with Zuckerberg.
Exactly the same loop, just applied to storytelling instead of defense.
So if you want that Attenborough authority, you need to switch your mental lens.
Yes, the tool here is the narrator lens. When you're explaining a quarterly report or a project update, visualize that you're describing a scene. Don't try to win an argument. Try to paint a picture. That visualization automatically slows you down.
And there's a tactic called one image per sentence.
This is so crucial for clarity. In rush mode, we tend to pack 3 complex ideas into one single breath. We need to update the strategy because the Q3 numbers are down and marketing is complaining about the budget.
It's a run-on train wreck.
Right, and the listener is exhausted just trying to keep up.
So how would Attenborough do it?
Attenborough would break that down. He'd say, the Q3 numbers are down. Pause. Breathe. Marketing is concerned about the budget. Pause. Breathe. Therefore, we must update the strategy.
It's so much more digestible.
Yeah.
And powerful.
And critically, it gives you, the speaker, time to breathe in between the images. You are refueling. You never run out of air, so you never get that strangled, high-pitched sound at the end of a long sentence.
There's also Twain's rule, named after Mark Twain. No word was ever as effective as a rightly timed pause.
Attenborough is the master of that. He lets the silence do the heavy lifting. He will say something profound, and then just silence. He lets it sink in.
Whereas most of us are terrified of silence in a meeting.
We are. We think it means we've forgotten what to say or that we're losing the room.
But actually, the silence draws people in.
It signals confidence. It says, I am comfortable enough to wait. This idea is important enough to wait for.
So we have Zuckerberg holding the line against pressure and Attenborough guiding us with patience. But now we have to talk about the dark side of this, because there is a danger in trying too hard to manipulate your voice.
This brings us to Silicon Valley in the mid-2010s and the story of Elizabeth Holmes.
The founder of Theranos. Now, obviously, there was a massive fraud involving the blood testing technology, and we could do 10 episodes on the ethics of that.
Oh, easily.
But today, we're focusing specifically on the voice. She was famous for this incredibly deep, baritone-speaking voice.
It was her trademark. Along with the black turtleneck, it was part of the whole persona.
But it became a huge point of controversy. I remember reports from Business Insider and former employees suggesting it was an effect, a deliberate performance to sound more authoritative in a male-dominated industry.
Right, but then her family told Vanity Fair that the low voice was natural, that it ran in the family.
So there was this whole debate.
Exactly, and we aren't here to diagnose her biology or solve the mystery of whether it was 100% fake or not. But what's interesting is what happened later.
After the company collapsed.
After Theranos collapsed, reports surfaced like from Yahoo. Tech that in more casual settings or when she was caught off guard, her voice sounded much higher and more, ordinary.
The sources call this a cautionary tale. Why does this matter for the listener? Most of us aren't running billion-dollar frauds.
It matters because it highlights the extreme risk of identity performance. Even if we assume for a second she was faking it, look at the cost.
Okay.
First, there's the physical tension. Pushing your larynx down to force a low sound creates massive strain. You're literally fighting your own anatomy.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. You have to stiffen your neck muscles to hold the voice box down. And that leads to the second problem. Cognitive load.
Cognitive load.
If you are constantly monitoring your voice to make sure it sounds low enough, you aren't really focused on your content. You're managing a performance, not leading a discussion. Your brain is splitting its resources between what you're saying and how you're sounding.
And the third problem is the big one. Distrust.
This is the killer. Listeners are incredibly sensitive to incongruence. We have a built-in radar for fakeness. It's an evolutionary survival tool.
So if something feels off.
If a voice sounds worked or manipulated, if it falls into that uncanny valley where it sounds almost human but not quite right, we instinctively question the speaker's honesty. The message gets lost.
That's the paradox, isn't it? The sources mention studies from PLOS showing that people do prefer leaders with lower voices. We associate depth with competence and strength.
That's true. The bias exists. We can't deny the data. But, and this is a huge but, the penalty for being caught faking it is much higher than the penalty for just having a normal voice.
So you're saying an authentic, higher-pitched voice is better than a fake, deep one?
Infinitely more trustworthy.
So the lesson from Elizabeth Holmes is, don't chase low pitch.
Right. Chase low urgency. The goal should be a voice that people don't notice because they are too busy listening to your ideas.
That's a great rule of thumb.
If people are talking about your voice like they were with Holmes, you've probably lost them. You want to be transparent, not a performance.
Okay, so we know what not to do. Don't fake it. Don't force the larynx down. But what is the physical foundation of a naturally strong voice? This takes us to our final historical figure.
Yes.
And honestly, this is the emotional core of the research for me.
King George VI. And for anyone who has seen the movie The King's Speech, you know this story. But the reality was even more intense than the film.
September 3rd, 1939. A historic moment. Britain is declaring war on Germany. The king has to go on the radio and speak to the entire empire.
Just imagine the pressure. He's not just a monarch, he's a man with a severe, well-known stammer.
He had previously suffered public humiliation because of it.
A deep fear of the microphone that was bordering on a phobia. And now, he has to be the voice of strength for millions of people in their darkest hour.
He worked with a speech therapist named Lionel Logue. But the sources point out that Logue wasn't teaching him eloquence in the traditional sense. He wasn't teaching him to be a great orator.
No, Logue was an Australian who didn't care about fancy posh accents. He was all about mechanics. He taught the king about the coordination between the larynx and the thoracic diaphragm.
The diaphragm. I feel like every choir teacher I ever had screamed about the diaphragm. But I never really understood what it actually did.
It's the engine, it's everything. The speech the king had to give, the grave hour speech, required depth of feeling. Physiologically, that means stable breath. You see, psychological stress increases your fundamental frequency, as we discussed with Zuckerberg. Your body tightens, your diaphragm freezes up.
So the king's battle wasn't just against the stammer, it was against his body's natural reaction to terror.
Correct. The fix that Logue taught him was that you must fight the tightening not with effort, but with stability. You don't push the voice out from the throat, you support it from below.
This is the support principle.
Yes. Depth is built by controlling what sits underneath the pitch, the breath pressure. Think of it like a beach ball in a pool. If you try to hold it underwater, that takes a lot of effort and tension.
Right.
If you just let it float, it's stable. Your voice needs to float on a column of steady air. If you have that air, your throat can relax. And when the throat relaxes, the pitch drops naturally.
Stability first, depth follows.
That's the formula.
I love that. Stability first, depth follows. It's almost a life philosophy, not just a vocal technique.
It really is. The king had to learn to trust the air in his lungs. And if you listen to that speech today, you can hear it. It's not perfect. There are pauses, there are moments where you can hear him fighting for control, but it is incredibly powerful because it is anchored.
So what are the actionable tools from this? How do we apply the king's speech method to a Zoom call? Most of us aren't declaring war, but we still get that diaphragm freeze.
We absolutely do. One key tool is the exhale first start.
Walk us through that.
Okay, think about what you do when you're about to speak in a stressful moment. You usually take a big, gasping breath in.
Gasps. Okay, so regarding the Q4 numbers.
Exactly. You just locked all that tension into your chest. You're holding your breath while trying to speak, which is why you sound strangled. Instead, try breathing out first.
Breathe out before I speak.
Before you speak. Blow the stale air out. Reset the system. Then let the air fall back in naturally. Don't suck it in. Just let the vacuum fill your lungs and speak on that fresh breath. It completely changes the game.
You're avoiding talking on leftover air.
That's it. Another one is one sentence per breath.
This sounds like the Attenborough technique.
It's the same principle, just focused on the mechanics. Limit yourself to one core idea, one sentence per breath cycle. Speak the sentence, stop, breathe, speak the next one. It creates a rhythm that sounds incredibly authoritative because it is so regular, it sounds like a drum beat.
And then there's the low rib expansion.
This is the physical cue. Right now, as you're listening, put your hands on your lower ribs on the sides. When you breathe in, your ribs should widen out to the sides. You should feel your hands moving apart.
And if my shoulders are going up toward my ears.
Then you're panic breathing. You're breathing vertically, which is shallow. You want to breathe horizontally, shoulders down, ribs wide. Wide ribs equal a stable voice.
And finally, the stress reset phrase.
This is a mental cue for in-the-moment rescue. When you feel your throat tightening in a meeting, just say a phrase to yourself like steady air or breathe low. It reminds you to focus on the breath, not the pitch. Don't try to fix the sound, fix the engine.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from Congress to the jungle to Silicon Valley to Buckingham Palace. Let's try to bring this all together. What is the synthesis?
If we look at the common thread across all four of these stories, it's about moving from a state of panic to a state of design.
Right. Zuckerberg taught us to rehearse the pace. Don't let the adrenaline dictate your speed. Build a binder, build a system. Wait those 2 beats.
And Attenborough taught us to narrate, not rush. Treat your listener like they need to be guided, not bombarded. Use silence as a tool, not a gap you need to fill.
Elizabeth Holmes taught us the big one. Don't force it. Authenticity wins, and faking depth destroys trust. If you're focusing on the performance, you're failing the leadership test.
And King George VI taught us to support the breath. You need that physical foundation of stable air to keep the tension out of your throat. Stability first, depth follows.
It's amazing how these four very different people basically map out the entire manual for a better, more authoritative voice.
They do. And notice, none of it requires being born with a specific set of vocal cords. It's all behavior, it's all physics, it's all learnable.
So for the listener who wants to try this immediately, maybe they have a big meeting in an hour, what is the Try This Now toolkit?
Okay, let's combine the micro steps into a quick drill. First, pick a scary question you might get asked, or just a standard update you have to give.
Write it out.
Yes, but specifically, write a 3-module answer. Sentence 1, the direct answer. Sentence 2, one supporting fact. Sentence 3, the next step.
Okay. Short and sweet, no rambling, keep it tight.
Now, practice saying it out loud, but here's the rule. Say it 10% slower than you think you should.
Only 10%, that doesn't sound like much.
That's all it takes. You don't need to be in slow motion. Just taking 10% off the top shifts you from an anxious pace to a controlled pace. And before you start that first sentence, use the exhale first trick. Breathe out, let it come in, then speak.
And if you're brave enough, record yourself on your phone.
Yes. This is painful, but so necessary. And record it 2 ways. First, do the forced low version where you try to sound like a movie trailer.
The Elizabeth Holmes method.
Right, the performative version. And then do the calm low version where you just focus on the breath and the 10% slower pace.
And listen to the difference.
Listen to the difference. One sounds like a parody, the other sounds like a leader. You'll hear the resonance kick in on the second one, not because you forced it, but because you relaxed enough to let it happen.
You know, we started this by saying the voice is an instrument, but I think what we've learned is that it's also a barometer.
A barometer? How so?
It tells you what's happening inside. If your voice is high and tight, it's because you are tight. If you can control your voice, you're actually controlling your internal state.
That's a profound point. The goal isn't really to change who you are or to put on a mask. It's to stop your body's own stress response from hijacking your message.
As this source says. System scale, performances crack. If you build the system, the breathing, the pacing, you don't have to perform, you just have to speak.
And remember that snap close maxim. Depth isn't intensity, it's control.
I love that. Before we go, I want to leave the listener with one final provocative thought from our research.
What's that?
There's a line that describes the voice as the muscle of the soul. I think it's beautiful, but it's also practical. If you can control your breath during a crisis, like King George, like Zuckerberg, you aren't just sounding like a leader. By calming your physiology, by regulating that vagus nerve through your breath, you are physically becoming one.
You're hacking your own biology to lead the room.
Exactly. So next time you speak, take a breath, slow down, and let the depth find you.